Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine. Welcome to this series where we are exploring the grade 4 curriculum. I'm sharing with you my Waldorf inspired books and resources that can complement the main lesson books. These are from Live Education, or you can use these resources to create your own lessons, although once you see them all, it's probably going to just be easier to buy the curriculum itself. So we've already gone through the introduction of the 4th year. We've already covered the resources for grammar. We've explored our math resources, focusing on fractions and our multiplication tables. And today we're going to look at the history for the grade 4 curriculum. Now, history for grade 4 is going to go through Beowulf, which is the Angles, Saxons, Celts, and Danes. Now, I do have an extensive video that goes through the entire curriculum, an extensive review. You can find that video down in the description box below. I go through each of these main lesson blocks. We also have the Kalevala, and we also have Norse myths. Now, I already did an extensive video that goes over all of the books and resources you can use for a Norse mythology unit, so I'm not going to go through all of those extensive resources now. And the other thing is that I don't have resources for Beowulf or the Kalevala, but inside the beginning of the main lesson block are some suggestions for the resources that you can use. And at the beginning of the grade 4 overview, there are also a list of the books and resources that you can add to this curriculum. And now that list is very concise, and it's just the books that you're going to need, versus the resources that I'm sharing are quite extensive. A lot of them in some ways are a little bit redundant. I'm sharing with you a lot of the books that I have in our library, and some of them are repeats in their concepts and in the information that's provided in the books. So I wouldn't suggest getting all of the books that I suggest. That would be just probably too much to go through in a main lesson block or in a school year. A lot of times I do use these books and I do evaluate them, and I find ones that work better for us or better at a particular time. So for the Norse myths, I do want to share with you a couple of resources that you can use. And one of them is actually suggested, and that's the Dollier's Book of Norse Myths. And this has really gorgeous illustrations compared to some of the other books on Norse mythology that we have. And so for that reason, this is the one that I chose to share with you. But I do have maybe 4 books that go over the Norse myths, and some have no illustrations or very minimal illustrations. Others have different kinds of illustrations. This just seems like a classic, so this is a great one to have if you're going to go over this topic, this main lesson block, or if you want to do that main lesson block and not buy the entire curriculum, then this would be a really great resource to have. If you wanted to have a more Waldorf approach to that lesson without buying the entire curriculum, you might consider the Charles Kovacs books. These are written or were written by a Waldorf teacher. These are his notes collected and published after his passing. And this is the material that he would have used or presented in his classroom. And so there are several books in the series. And if you wanted to do the main lesson block approach in a Waldorf style for this grade with this material, then this would be a really great resource. There are a couple of things that I'm not 100% loving about this book series, but with every book and resource, I would suggest that you use what you like, you omit the things that you don't like, and consider the parts that you do enjoy about the book, because there can be some things, maybe not in this one so much as other books, that are questionable. One more book I want to share with you is the Dollier's Book of Norwegian Folktales. This one is sort of new for us, and it doesn't quite coordinate with the main lesson blocks for this grade, but the essence of the stories I think would work really well for this grade if you wanted to omit one of the other main lesson blocks that are suggested, whether it's the Kalevala or Beowulf. For me personally, we did do the Norse myths, but we actually had stories that worked a little bit better for our religion and culture and heritage. We had a few books, or rather stories, that worked a little bit better. And to understand that a little bit more, to know which stories to use if you want to replace the stories that are provided in the main lesson, is to have a little bit more of an understanding of the development of the child and some of the maybe challenges that the child is going through at these different stages, and to choose stories that can help support those changes and support some of those challenges that the child is having. So at age 10, there is this colliding of the inner world and the outer world that the student is going through. And there is this understanding of time that the student did not have before, the child did not have before. Before the 9-year change, time seems eternal. I remember thinking that summer vacation and the school year were of equal time, that they both lasted a year. I didn't understand that one was shorter than the other. And then after the 9-year change, you are out of this imaginative pretend phase. You can still do pretend, but it's not, rather you have a distinction between reality and fiction or fantasy. Prior to that, there is not a very clear differentiation between reality and fantasy. Even if you explain to your child that it's pretend, they might parrot back to you that it's pretend, and they can say that they understand, but they really don't truly understand until they've gone through the 9-year change. That's the time when a lot of children stop believing in make-believe characters that they were told were real. If you imagine the holidays, that's a time when they are coming out of that and realizing that those are not real, that they're pretend and fantasy. So if you wanted to choose different stories for your student, I particularly like using the creation story. And I do want to preface that the creation story I am a Muslim, so the creation story in Islam, while it might resemble the creation story of the Jews and the Christians, it is actually very distinctly different. And it is in those differences that really set these stories apart from one another. So I wouldn't just think that they were all the same, even though a lot of the aspects are the same, the people or the figures are the same, but the progression of the story is actually very, very different. And I go through the Islamic creation story of Adam and Eve, Adam and Hawa, on the blog post that accompanies this video, so that you can understand how using these other stories might be the right kind of stories for you, depending on your cultural background, your religious background, and maybe these stories aren't the right stories for you. You could still certainly use them, but if you're looking for something that's going to resonate a little bit more for you, then you might consider understanding the development of the child so that you can incorporate some of those other stories instead. So the last book is the Daler's book of Norwegian folktales. And the reason why I liked including this one is that some of the stories are not as long as the Norse myths stories. And so it's nice to include these in your opening activities. Some of the stories are still just as long, so you might split those up over 2 days, or just expect to take a little bit more time in your opening activities. But I think this book would really coordinate well with the 4th grade year. If you want more extensive resources for Norse mythology, I encourage you to check out that video as well as the blog post that accompanies this video. You can get all of the resources that I'm using as well as links to the materials. You can find that link down in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.